Parent Chat is brought to you by the Lake Washington Schools Foundation. LWSF is a nonprofit organization dedicated to raising funds and amplifying community resources to ensure that every student in the Lake Washington School District has what they need to thrive, both now and in the future. The Lake Washington Schools Foundation collaborates closely with the school district to invest in and implement essential programs that remove barriers, support wellness, enhance learning, and build connections for all students. From weekend food packs for students in need to inclusive library grants to programs like Parent Chat, the Foundation's work ensures that every child has the opportunity to succeed. We offer a variety of programs and initiatives to support our mission. Here's a quick glance at some of them. You can learn more about the Foundation's work at www.lwsf.org. We encourage you to stay connected with us by subscribing to our e-newsletter to hear about upcoming events, stories of impact, and opportunities to make a difference. You can make a contribution online, and you can follow us on social media. Together, we can create a nurturing and dynamic learning environment where our children can reach their fullest potential. Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad you are here. Let me see. I'm so sorry. I'm looking how I can stop this share here. There we go. So good evening. Glad you're here. We have a fantastic speaker tonight and a really needed topic of conversation. So we have so much to talk about. We're going to, of course, have a presentation, but we're also going to be kind of chatting and conversation style. And we highly encourage you to give us questions that you have. I know that a lot of you are going to have questions about personal things going on with you in this arena, and just questions about what we're talking about. So put those in the Q&A box so they don't get lost. And as we go along, if you have some comments or something, feel free to put those in the chat box. And I will warm the chat box up by just asking everyone to kind of say why you're here tonight, what you're hoping to get from it. And just so it seems like if we get the chat box going at the beginning, then everybody's comfortable doing it. So you can just drop something in the chat box. We will love to see that. So I'm going to welcome Marcel Waldman onto the screen because we just want to dive in. There's so much to talk about when we're talking about screens and kids and the effects and all of that stuff. So welcome, Marcel. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you so much for having me back. I love getting to speak out to our community here. So thank you so much, and also chat with you, Sherry.
Lots to talk about. Yeah.
Well, we do have a lot to talk about. So I'm going to go ahead and share, and we will go ahead and dive into our. All right. Well, you can see that all right, I hope.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, I'll go ahead and introduce myself here. My name is Marcel Waldman. I am the founder of Feelings. I am a certified elementary teacher, been in the teaching world for over 20 years. I'm certified in youth mental health first aid. I'm a parent and community educator, similarly to what Sherry does too. And I am now a Parents of Adolescents and Teens group leader, and also part of the Issaquah Schools Foundation board trustee. So just right over next door to all of you. So really, I've just been in this world of children and youth and mental health and support. And so we decided this topic has been really big for us in the generation of children that we have. So we decided this was a really important topic that many of us have some questions about or wonderings about or strong opinions about. So like Sherry said, please feel free to ask questions or share things in the chat so we can get that going as well. And Just a quick overview of really what we're going to dive into. And the first thing we're really going to look at is the US Surgeon General's advisories around loneliness and isolation, as well as social media and youth mental health. We'll take just a quick look at some of the data that's specific to the Lake Washington School District and our county and state, and then we'll look at things on more of a national level. And that will be with a really great book that has come up in lots of conversations called The Anxious Generation. We'll look at things a little more broadly. We'll talk about how our brain and sort of that feedback loop and what happens when we're looking at media and what's happening to our brains. And like I said, we'll talk a bit about the anxious generation. And that's really kind of who are the anxious generation and how do we support from our end as parents and caretakers and community people. We'll look at play-based childhood versus screen-based childhood. We'll talk about kind of those forms of media. And then we'll start talking about strategies of increasing the connection and belonging and really what we could do, but also our communities and what our kids can do and our teens can do. So we will be covering a lot, but also, like we said, it'll be conversational. There'll be lots of places where we can also have you join in. So without further ado, we will go ahead. And I know Sherry kind of asked beginning, like, why are you here? And if you would like to, we'd love to hear just the ages of kind of the children in your homes or that are in your world so that we can get a good idea of what our audience looks like this evening. All right, so just going to start out with this. And I think, Sherry, this would be a great place. I would love to hear too from you. Like, where do you find your connections, or where do you find belonging, and where do you feel that in your life?
Yeah, everyone think about that and put all these answers in the chat box.
Yeah.
I love that you are using the word belong. So important versus fit in. I really appreciate that. It's just such a difference. And yeah, I mean, it's something to think about and to think about it from our kids' point of view too.
Yes, definitely. And the next one is, how does connection support your own mental well-being, right? So our mental health, our physical, our emotional, like all of that, like how does connection support that? And these are really setting up the why for what we're talking about tonight, and the importance of getting back to more connection and belonging as people. And over time, there's been some reasons, and we'll talk about that, on where things may have found that disconnect and what we could do to bring back connection. So again, love for you to put some of that in the chat and think about that as we're talking tonight about your own and like Sherry said, for your kids too. So I wanted to just give a quick overview of the US Surgeon General's advisories. There are two specifically that I just wanted to give just some quick information on to kind of set up, where this is really coming from. So in 2023, Dr. Murthy put out this advisory around the epidemic of loneliness and isolation that's happening in our nation. It talks about the importance of social connection for individuals and also, as communities, and how that really supports our own health and well-being. It talks about the significant consequences when social connection is lacking in our lives. In fact, the lack of social connection can be more detrimental to our health than many other things that could be detrimental to our health. It explores the cultural, community, and societal dynamics that drive connection and also disconnection. There's talk about recommendations for how we can increase and strengthen social connection. And we're going to talk about some of that here. And then there's national recommendations that are for governments and research institutions, also schools and workplaces, community-based organizations, and things that we can do in our own homes. And then the next one I just wanted to give, again, a quick, just a quick understanding through is the Social Media and Youth Mental Health Advisory that also came out in 2023. And this one is about how the growing concerns around social media and our youth mental health. And we'll be focusing in on some of this tonight, of course. And also exploring and describing the current evidence on both the positive and the negative impacts of social media for our children and our adolescents. I also want to stress that while we are focusing more on some of the tough stuff with social media or media in the lives of our children, there are positives and there are things that we can allow our children and also ourselves, and also know that sometimes the use of that is a coping mechanism or is something that our children might turn to. So knowing that there are positives, like our world has become very digital, and so there are positive things about it. And looking at those primary areas for mental health and well-being concerns around the excessive use and opportunities for additional research, so that there is more to be learned and there's more to understand. We do not know the full impact. There is research happening and there is research that's been done, but also things are moving along. And then again, more actionable recommendations. So I would highly advise, there are, you can search for these. We can try and get those links in the chat, but you can read through these. They're really wonderful, and they are written for us to be able to read them and understand and dive in further. So just wanted to give an overview of those. So understanding tonight, again, like I said, we're going to dive a little bit into the numbers from the Healthy Youth Survey that the Lake Washington School District did. We will be looking at that versus King County data, some Washington State data, and then looking at things more nationally. And when I say data, don't get scared. It is more about what are we seeing happening? What's happening in the ages of our children? What's happening within their world of media, and what's happening in their world of physical movement and relationships and time with friends? So that's really what we're looking at. Like I said, there are positives associated with social media use, and also please know that the research that was presented in the report and as well in the Anxious Generation book, those were done by gender, male, female, and also age-based. So that is how the research was performed. Okay, so look at this. So this is the 2023 Healthy Youth Survey. This is the Lake Washington School District versus the state of Washington as a whole. And this is looking at screen time. This is excessive screen time, which means 3 or more hours of screen time on average of a school day. So thinking about, it's not the school work, and it's not, the time spent on a screen to do your homework. This is outside of that time. So it's the TV, the computer, the phones, electronic devices, videos, playing gaming. So looking at these numbers, we're looking at the ages, the grades that take that Healthy Youth Survey is 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th. And so we can really see that kind of the big overall, percentage that's really driven up in time. I don't know if you think about your younger, middle school age kiddos, and then we're thinking about our, 10th and 12th graders. Maybe there's different interests now, right? So like our 12th graders are finding more time on social media, and our 6th graders might be more involved in some other things. I don't really know what has caused this, but I do think that there is a piece of waiting where we're seeing some families are making the decision to wait. There is a really strong campaign about waiting till 8th grade. I know that is something that I have actually heard a lot more about in the most recent time. And I know the Anxious Generation book kind of talks about that. So, But again, so excessive screen time would be 3 or more hours of screen time in a day that is not doing their schoolwork.
Okay,
So
so I was just going to ask that. So these are hours beyond
beyond.
schoolwork.
Yes, exactly.
Interesting. Okay.
Yes. So then when we look at Lake Washington School compared to the county, we're also like very close too. So I think what's nice to be able to look at is like where those lines sort of match up and where we can see that trajectory is going up. So the percentage of students that are utilizing screens 3 or more hours per day from 2012 to 2023, we can see a pretty up swoop in that data right now, right? So part of that, we need to think about, and we'll talk in a bit about like when the smartphone came out and then when social media started becoming really big, and that's around that 2012, 2013, 2014. So then we start seeing that rise, because then we're having more use around the social media or gaming. And another piece of data that I wanted to take out of this was because when we think about kind of the sitting and using the social media, we also need to think of like the physical activity, right? So we need to think about how often are our kids getting outside? How often are our kids getting up and doing something physical, whether it be, I just said goodbye to my kiddo on the way he's going to baseball. Are they interested in a sport or activity? Are they interested in being able to go outside and take a walk? Do you have a dog, which my puppy's trying to get in right now? Can they go take the dog on a walk? Like, are there things that we're doing as parents and caretakers to really support this idea of getting out and going to do something active? Because the more we can see those numbers of media use rising in our kids, then we are also seeing lack of physical activity rising. So this is purely less than 60 minutes of physical activity per day. And this is percentage of students. So we can see again that we had some downturn, and I think that's like some pandemic time stuff. And now we're going back up. So we're seeing more students in the Lake Washington School District saying so, and also in our county saying that they spend less than 60 minutes of physical activity per day. So we're not going to take into account PE class. We're going to take into account what they're doing outside of. Okay. So when we're again thinking about media use, we want to think of ways that we can get our kids out and moving. And again, not all children are interested in getting into team sports or those sorts of things, or dance, but those are great. But also, can we think of other ways to get them moving, getting outside, getting out for a hike, whatever that is, taking the dog for a walk. And then the last piece I took out of the Healthy Youth Survey for this school district, and then again, looking at King County data, which is very similar here, and that is worry. And we'll talk a bit about worry and how worry comes in with the use of media and why that is happening. But also thinking about how are we helping support our children as they're seeing things out in the world, right? As they're taking in the social media, or as they're seeing a news story, or as they have witnessed a lot in their young lives. They've gone through a pandemic. They've seen a lot of things. They've been around for things that maybe, we can't say that we had at such a young age. But the inability to control worry has really risen in our children. And there is definitely a correlation that they are finding in the research of all of the news stories and the scare that has kind of been given to our kids because of the media that a lot of them, as we see, are taking in. So again, with all of this data, we are going to look at ways that we can then support and be helpful to our kids. So a quick little brain kind of lesson here real quick. So our brain is our control center. So that is billions of nerve cells, right? So our brain is communicating through those electrical and chemical signals. All of our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions are happening inside of our brains. And it's monitoring what's happening from the outside and what's happening on the inside, right? So what we're going to talk about now is like, as we are taking in the media and as we're taking in all of that, what is actually happening? So here's an example of what's happening in our brains when we are looking at social media or when we are playing a game of some sort. So what we know is there is this anticipation that happens, right? So we're like, maybe we're looking at our phone, maybe we're curious, maybe we're playing a game and we're curious how the reaction's going to be of someone else we're playing with. So there is this actual anticipation, and we get a rush of dopamine. And dopamine is what is the sort of, if you want to call it like the happiness in our brain that is actually released when things like likes, comments, follows, those text message dings, all of those things are actually truly chemically giving us like this dopamine increase. And so as that's happening, typically we get these feel-good emotions. And what does that do? It motivates us to seek more of it. So then we're either sharing more out to the world or to our friends, or we're liking other people's and hoping they're going to do the same thing back. So we're having this, like, again, it's this feedback loop that's happening as our brain is chemically reacting to social media. And so these are the things that we are that the researchers are really looking at, like, this is really happening. So how do we change our habits, right? How do we create other connections? How do we get our children and even adults like reconnected in person? So this isn't the only way that we're activating that joy. So what are the things that your kids are doing that activates joy in their life? And this would be wonderful to share here that is not related to screen time. So not related to social media, not related to gaming. What are the other things that bring that joy to your child? I would say I happen to have a baseball player and a softball player, and I have a pretty social daughter. Like, her time with her friends is very joyful, but I also see that there is, more phone usage now than there was like 3 months ago with them. Mm-hmm. So seeing those changes as they're getting older, she's a freshman, so sometimes I want to just say, like, everyone put them in a pile and let's just like be here together, so yeah. We'll talk a bit more about how us as parents can create and help support and create those connections, because those are the things that our children really need. And we've needed them all of time, right? Mm-hmm. Connections in person. So think about those examples in your child's life, or even for yourself, that brings that joy, that gives you, whether it's a walk outside by yourself, right? That can give you a great dose of dopamine, right? So what are some things that maybe are not related to screens that help us feel that?
This is a really great question. A lot of times when I'm talking with kids about screen time, right? Because I like for them to think about not their parents monitoring it, but them monitoring it, right? What are they seeing? So I'll ask them, what are you giving up on that hour of screen time? What could you be doing off of the screen time? And especially with the younger ones, it's really good as they're transitioning into screen time usage that,
Mhm.
it might be like, oh, I'm not playing with my Legos anymore. I'm
Mhm.
not playing with the dog anymore. I'm not playing with the neighbor anymore. So when they start to see that what they're giving up for screen time, then it's less of we're going to restrict you from screen time. It's more like you're going to go do these other things because you want to do those things.
Right. And like you said, part of that is just like reminding them, like, remember
Hmm.
you love to take your scooter out. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I did like that. And then I got out of that, maybe because it's dark at 4:30, but we've got to definitely bring them back to those things that do bring joy, that aren't necessarily the screens all the time for them. And I hate to say all the time, I think we have our own individual situations in our families. We have needs sometimes that, it's like, you need to be doing, you just go watch a show because I need to do this. So there are
Right.
reasons why, and like I said to start, like, there are some really great things about media and technology, and we've come a long ways, and we are a digital world. So there are good reasons why we have progressed where we are. But right now, we're really looking at this sort of screen-based lifestyle, and how do we support more connection and less isolation? So, as we said, I think, Sherry, you have your copy too, but
Yep.
we have,
Lots of bookmarks and highlights.
yep. Yes, no one's borrowing this. They don't want to look at all of my. um, so if you have not yet read this book, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, it is just it's an important look into really what is happening, and what is this kind of great rewiring of the brain, and what is this great rewiring of childhood. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means here in a second. But I had to take this one out of the book. I thought this was a really good little cartoon. And it says, "It's been so nice getting to interact with you for these past 6 years. Here's your first device." And like
Yes.
you said, I think there are critical reasons why, we may have to hand a device to our kids because we need to do something. Maybe we're working and there's just nothing else to keep them, at that time. But so this is something that, again, we want to say that we need to look at the bigger picture and how we can create more real world connections and less of the isolation, and less time on screens. And what does that look like, and how can we help with that? So who are the anxious generation? Well, there are kids that were born between 1996 and 2010. There are Gen Zers, we can call them the Zoomers or the I generation, digital natives, the internet generation. So they're really the first generation of Americans that went through puberty with smartphones and social media in their lives. They have become the most anxious, depressed, self-harming, and suicidal generation. And that, again, there can be many pieces that are attributed to the why, but this is what we do know, is that the rates of depression and anxiety have surged amongst adolescents in many developed Western nations at the same time between 2010 and 2015 in very similar ways. So we're going to look at places that this book looks at, the UK and Australia, and places that look very similar to what's happening here. And at this time, there are no other theories that have yet explained why, besides the arrival of smartphones and social media. So the arrival of the smartphone was in 2007. And what started happening? Well, we started losing our ability to be fully present. I mean, how many times have you been with a friend or been in a meeting or sat at a table with a phone out? And it could be for, well, if my kid calls me or I need to have it there. But oftentimes we're appearing as though we're attending to things, but we're really monitoring, or maybe we're feeling worried or anxious, like, where is my kid? They were supposed to check in. And so then we're thinking about that constantly. Or maybe we've posted something and we're curious to know if anyone in the world of virtual, Facebook, Instagram, whatever is talking to us back from what we posted. People started consuming content not only from friends, but from strangers. Started being able to play games mobily, in a car or wherever we're going, taking those things with us. It was no longer the car rides with like the little magnetic, hangman or tic-tac-toe boards, it started becoming screens. I mean, screens in cars, like on seats, and devices coming in the car. I know when our kids were little, it was like, okay, well, we're going on a 3-hour car. So, okay, we could take the iPad, it's like we're trying to weigh like, how are we going to get through the 3-hour car ride with the, little ones? Oh, maybe we need that. So, but it became that was our world, right? That is our world. That is all of a sudden like not what we grew up with. And now we are in this sort of screen-based lifestyle. We can watch the videos on the go. And like I said, the posting on social media. So with that, I thought this quote was really telling. And it's something that when I talk about this, I use often, and I think about this a lot, is that we are forever elsewhere, right? So like, while we're here, are we really here? Are our kids really engaged in what they're doing at school, at home, with their friends, at their music classes or dance classes? Are they really there, or are they thinking about what else is happening out in the virtual world?
And us. We
Yes,
can't just say it's our kids, right? And us. Are we really there for
absolutely.
our kids? And
I know.
yep.
I know. Yeah. So watching TV has been on the rise since the 50s. So what is so different now? Well, yeah. Do we remember those TVs?
Yeah.
Well, we are more portable, very personalized, as we know. Like I'll be scrolling through some, feed, and I'm like, how it says it's a Waldman sweatshirt. Like, where did that come from? Like they know me, or everything on my feed is about, emotional and mental health. And it's like all the algorithms, they figured you out. Everything's so personalized and very engaging, right? So like I was saying before too, that kind of that hit, that dopamine, that excitement of like, oh, there's my old friend, and now we're talking, and now we're sending messages, and everything's very engaging. So what we've seen is the rise in teen suffering. And as I said, between that 2010 and 2015 time, we started seeing this unprecedented rise in not only the United States, but also similarly Australia, UK, Canada, and other developed Western nations. So while there is a lot of other contributors that we can start throwing in about what causes or is related to the poor mental health of our teens, we really can see this very large uptick in this very large increase in both our girls and our boys, which was taken again out of the anxious generation. This data is from there. So this is actually the US National Survey. And look at 2010 to 2015 is really that timing where smartphones came out in the 2007, and then we started seeing the social media and all of that started coming out in the gaming. And look at that. I mean, the increase is huge. So the percentage of teens as we're hitting that 2021-ish mark is we have 145% increase since 2010 of major depression among teens. And we're talking about ages 12 to 17 having at least one major depressive episode in the past year. And this is self-reporting, and 161% increase in boys. And as I said, the way the research was done was girls and boys. So what we know, world events didn't suddenly worsen in 2012, but they were posted on social media and they were pumped into our children in a way that was new and different for any of us to be able to even understand and recognize, like, what do I do with this? And then we started those emotions became contagious about what is happening in the world around them. Other generations, including us in Generation X, that born between 1965 and 1980, while we haven't seen this clinical rise in depression and anxiety, what we have seen is a much more scattered, much more exhausted and distracted generation. I mean, how many times are we, like, I told my whole family, I'm like, I'm going live, and remember, like, all of your texts come through in case of emergency, so please don't text me, like, but it's like there's that constant checking, or the constant wondering, even as Sherry was saying, us too, right? This isn't just our kids. We need to model and cultivate something different if that's what we're hoping to see from them.
Well, if you think about the news, how we used to get it, it would be like the nightly news, right? And you'd have to go sit in front of the TV, like ages ago, of course.
Right,
And it was
right on
on,
time.
yeah, and it was at that certain time. And most kids didn't really want to come and sit and watch the news with their parents. So they might get a little bit of it off to the side. We had newspapers, but it wasn't constant. And I think that's one thing that this generation with the screens is parents are no longer able to regulate the news that they're getting, but it's also all of the time.
Yeah. 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 We don't have control over what's on there. Even if you are putting um, rules and restrictions and things, like, that's not like fail safe. Like, it's not going to necessarily be what it is that you might think it is. Right. And I mean, I'll just be honest, like, because our children are digital natives, like, they might know how to do things way better than we do.
Yes.
So, and my husband works in the tech industry.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, and it's not even if our kids don't have devices, the
right.
other kids around them get
Oh,
that
yeah.
information and they talk about it and they share screens too. But yeah, I
Yes.
mean, so there's no foolproof way to keep it from them.
Well, and I think too, I would say, like, going back to some of the, bigger media stories and events that have happened in our children's lives, um, I think that I felt that as a parent, I didn't want them to get it elsewhere, so I had to. And that was just our family value of, like, we want you to hear it from us. I don't want you to go to school and hear that in a way that might not be, you know, all truth or all,
Mhm.
because again, sometimes we could see things on social media, and is it real? Is it not? And kids don't have the capacity to know. They don't, unless maybe the parents have told them what it is. So I think it's really important to note that, while we may not have grown up knowing all of the news, that, like you said, like, if they don't have a phone or a device, that someone else in their class will. And so how will you want them to receive that
Yeah.
information? So this goes back to what I was saying about age, how, you know, the Generation X is looking more like, we're not seeing that same kind of depression, anxiety prevalence that our youth is seeing. And so you can really see, kind of in this national survey data, by age, where we can see the difference. I mean, look at the 50 plus, is that like that it's like in 4% range. And we're looking at almost 20% of our 18 to 25-year-olds that are experiencing that anxiety. And so really looking at, what can we do to support our younger generation with not with hopefully having this go the other direction. So there are 4 foundational harms that come to mind when we're talking about media use. And this isn't just social media, it's just media in general, like screen use. And and these are really the harms that we're going to take and say, okay, what can we do about this as a community, as parents, as teachers, as community members? Social deprivation. So, Sherry, I know that you work a lot with, teenagers, and you talk to our youth about this. And I'm curious from you, do you hear a lot of them talking about the lack of face-to-face interaction with others, other than maybe being at school where
Mhm.
maybe in class with others, but
Yeah,
just
there's
that,
some of that.
yeah,
Yeah, I think the other thing that perhaps is social deprivation is that because they're on the screen, like I was talking about before, it replaces going out and having that face to face.
right.
So they get caught up in that, and instead of reaching out to someone wanting to go, hey, let's go outside and do something,
Right.
they're online with those interactions, which is not the same energetically, emotionally, as having like a in-person relationship.
Yeah, and that's too what I was going to say is like we're missing those social cues, right? When
Mhm.
we're over screen sending messages or whatever that looks like, Snapchat, snapping or texting or whatever they're doing,
Mhm.
that they're missing. And there's oftentimes I know when I say to my daughter, like, why don't you just call each other? Like we used to pick up a
Oh
phone,
no.
we just call. Like why are we
Oh, what?
yeah. The next one is sleep. So we are seeing major sleep deprivation due to screens. So we're sacrificing some really important health and foregoing things like the other one I was saying before was like those exercise habits, like getting out and doing something with our bodies. So these are really important for just a healthy lifestyle. Like sleep is so important, especially for our growing children and adolescents. Their brains are still forming, their bodies are forming. Like the sleep is like number one, right? Um, Attention fragmentation. So I talked a bit about that, like how we're kind of always, it's the notifications, it's the thoughts of like, well, what's happening on that, or who's liking it, or who's commenting, right? So it's the kind of that we're forever elsewhere, right? Like we're just thinking about things that aren't like right here. So thinking about your own kid, like doing homework or studying for their tests, like, are they thinking about their phone, or are they actually just like doing what they need to be doing? And a lot of that attention fragmentation just comes out of like, I mean, they're adolescents, their brains are developing. Like it's really easy to take their brain off of thinking about what you maybe
Mhm.
want them to be doing, which is doing their homework or studying for their test. And the last one, and we talked about this, is like that cycle of the dopamine hits and the true addiction that it can cause by that seeking and wanting more and anticipation from things like media and gaming and that screen time. So these are kind of the big four. And just as a quick, like looking at the numbers, so meeting up with friends, like that's 12th graders. And we're looking at this over time till about 2019, all the way back from like the 80s. And look at our percent of high school seniors that are reporting time with friends every day. Like it has drastically gone down. And then we're also looking at by age. So looking at minutes per day is along the left-hand side, and by year. So we are looking at, again, a drastic drop and a drastic decline in daily time with friends. So that is something that we need to be thinking about. How can we support more connection and time with friends for our own children and for ourselves as adults? It's important for us as well to find that connection and model those connections. So sleep. Um, Teens who are getting less than 7 hours of sleep per day, per night. So look at this. So we can see that since 2010, so that 2010 to 2015 range is really the focus of the anxious generation, because it's when media became, after the smartphone came out in 2007, and then we started hitting the social media and the constant screen feedback. Um, Look at this, like less than 7 hours of sleep. That's huge. We're almost like, our girls are almost at what, a 50%. That is,
Yeah. And I think that one of the part of it comes from phones being in the room, but the other piece of this is the anxiety that comes from the 24/7. So I work with
right.
girls who are having friendship issues or girl drama issues, right? And
Yeah,
so a lot of times when they go to bed, even if they don't have their phone,
they're
they're
so,
thinking about the
mm,
text that they're missing. Is that person going to be upset if I don't get back to them right away? There's
mhm.
a lot of the anxiety just from all the stuff, that we've talked about already, the news and such. So that all affects the sleep. It's not just having phones in the room.
Yes, yes. I mean, think about those, like, it used to be that things happen maybe at school and then you come home and like you do your home thing and then that's it. And then you go back to school. But now it's just everything goes everywhere
Yep.
with you. So even if you don't have the phone in your bedroom, it's still, you're thinking about what you're missing out on too. And that's another piece. So
Yeah.
attention fragmentation. So really this is about, in 2023, more than 46% of teens reported being online almost all the time. Like that's huge. Adolescents get an average of 237 notifications a day.
That
I
seems
mean,
low to me.
really, I don't know. I'm just like,
For
oh,
them, yes.
aren't you at school? Like, and you're getting them, even though like
Yeah.
most of our schools are often away or they've gone to no. I'm like, I don't even know.
Yeah.
97% of adolescents use their phones during the school day. And I know it's a big problem. I know that schools are trying to come up with different ways, but it is just there. I don't know. I mean, my kid, we're at Issaquah and there's over, there's 2,600 kids. So
Hmm.
a lot to monitor. Um, and there is just not much attention left for other things when they're, kind of in that. So that is attention fragmentation. And the last one here was the addiction piece. And that was really looking at what is happening other than screen time. Like, so screen-based activities. So this is over time from 1975 to 2015, going and looking at, this is from the UK, but again, we looked at data in this book, looked at data from the US and the UK and Western nations that really very much similar things are going on. But the deep, deep dive in outdoor play and socializing outside of the home and the big uptick in those screen-based activities. Good thing is we are seeing sports and homework up there too. So I guess that is it. That is a good thing. But also knowing that, like we talked about with those kind of hits to the brain, like what other things are bringing our kids pleasure and joy and satisfaction? So what are we helping them kind of not push them, but like get them to recognize, like you said, like, oh, I used to really like that. Let's get back to that. Let's go try and ride the scooter again, or let's go on a walk together or take a hike or whatever the thing is, but getting them more back into the things that bring joy. So this brings us to that great rewiring of the brain. So going from what we want to call the play-based childhood, and I'll tell you as a teacher, like a play was a very important part of my day with my kids, like letting them interact with each other, letting them, be at recess time together and having them really problem solve and do the things that kids should be doing. And what does that look like versus a phone-based childhood? So Jonathan Haidt says, wire up your brain by playing vigorously and often. And I love this picture of these kids because I'm like, this is what we want to see our littles doing. We want to see physical play, like out in the real world. We want to see risk. Like if you climb, we don't want broken bones, but bruises and bumps from playing and like knocking around and having a good time. And, like those are actually really important growths for our children for life. Like they're essential. They're dealing with conflict resolution when they're playing with each other. They're gaining physical skills. They're gaining emotional skills, emotional regulation, right? When the kiddo is upset about how something didn't go their way in the game or when they were playing together, like these are really important life skills that are totally essential for the development of our kids. And I want you to think about what this looks like on a screen as opposed to what this looks like in the real world, right? They're having successes, they're having failures, and those things are happening through play and socialization and connection, in face-to-face connection. And those are the things that we would like to see more of in this screen-based world, bringing back some of that play-based, especially as young children, but also like as our adolescents and as adults. Like these things, we do a game night with our friends like once a month on a Friday, and we play board games. Like, and it is so much fun. We talk and we interact and we play board games, right? So just thinking of ways to infuse that into our own lives too, and modeling that. And also knowing, so Jonathan Haidt says, by nature, all children are anti-fragile. We often want to coddle, and we often want to like be there to like save the things or grab them if they fall, and not that we want them to be hurt, but remember that the more we treat them as so fragile, the more that is what is going to be. We don't need these fragile adults walking around. We want to raise strong, empowered people. And so in order to do that, like they need to socialize. They need to get the bumps and the bruises and the ups and the downs. And that is how they learn resilience. It's actually today's World Kindness Day. Like that's how they learn to be kind, right? They need all of these things to be happening during play and interaction with each other in order to create those anti-fragile adults that we're trying to create. So we need to think about how we are overprotecting our kids right now in the real world, but some of us are underprotecting them online. So be thinking about ways that we can bring more discover mode to our kids, which is where many of us grew up with, right? So more hands-on experiences, more socialization really makes for happier people. As the Surgeon General tells us in the report, and I said to you in the beginning of this, we are dealing with social isolation and loneliness. And so the more we can get experiences of our children and ourselves together, then we are making for a more happier people. And I'm all about emotions and feeling all the different emotions. So this isn't about just being happy, but we really need face-to-face socialization to be social, happier humans. It's part of who we are. We're mammals. So again, like I said about overprotecting our kids and thinking about what are ways that we can help by giving our kids a little bit more autonomy, a little bit more where they get some choices in what they're doing and out in the world. Those are really beneficial for them. Risky play is also beneficial, right? So they're developing resilience, they're developing self-confidence when those bumps and those falls and those ups and downs are happening. So we already looked at this, so I'm gonna just skip this slide because I did already look at it. So we're gonna kind of just get into the takeaways, and then what are we gonna do? So we're seeing less face-to-face communication. We're seeing more screen-based childhood than ever before. We're seeing that elevated depression and anxiety levels. We're seeing problems in sleep. We're seeing physical health risks that are happening due to social isolation. We're seeing systems of exclusion and comparison when our kids are online and they're looking at media. Those are things that they are feeling like they are not a part of things, or feeling like they want to look like or do like somebody else. That's really a difficult place to be as a youth. We're seeing challenges regarding attention and focus, and we're seeing those kind of dopamine hits that are coming from social media. And these kids' brains and bodies are still under construction. Like they're still growing and developing. So what are we going to do? And what are those strategies we can do to increase belonging and connection? We need to give our kids more time to play and give them more social opportunities. So yes, when my kids were little, we called them play dates, and we used to set them up, and we called another parent. And I often even see, and I'll say I see it online, parents are saying, like, I'm new to the area. Like, are there any play groups? Like, they're looking. So again, social media can be a great thing too, where you can find groups of people. Maybe you're looking for a way to get together with people to get your kids meeting some new neighborhood friends. Maybe you want to create some tech-free zones in spaces in your home. Definitely want to establish those digital safety standards. What do those look like? What are those values for your family? And also, what are some digital media that might be more connection based, right? In technology, because that is, again, all around us. We need to encourage more play in schools. I know, coming from a kindergarten teacher here years back, lots of play, kitchen play, and all the good things where they're doing a lot of hands-on activities. Super important. Create family media plans. So what are your rules? What does it look like? Empower our kids with responsible online participation. Work with other parents to establish what those norms might be. Maybe it's your friends, your kids' friends' parents. Like, what are those norms going to be? Are we all waiting till 8th grade? Are we gonna make a pact together about what kinds of things we're letting our kids do and not do? Because once we get one person, and then but they have it, and then we have to fight that. And then we need to just strengthen social infrastructures in our communities. So we need more youth development programming. We need community events and spaces for us to gather and be together. I know my kiddo on Friday night is going to the Issaquah Community Center to do dodgeball, and it's for middle schoolers. Like, I don't know, I don't think they could play dodgeball in school anymore, but I think it's great. Like, what a fun few hours for them to find something together as community, and again, face-to-face play, probably risky play, with their peers. And we need to design spaces that are for social connection. And what can our kids do? They can ask for help. If they or someone they know is feeling negative effects from media, it's important. We want them to be able to open up and talk to us about that. They can work on their own balance of online and offline activities. Maybe that's a great table conversation for your family. We also want them to develop those strategies and healthy practices of, maybe they're looking at how much time they're on there, right? Are they in that excessive 3 hours, plus timing? Are they blocking things that don't make them feel good? Are they using privacy and safety settings correctly? Are they understanding the difference between fact and opinion when they're looking at things online? So these are all great ways that you can have those conversations. Are they ensuring connections with peers, right? So maybe modeling that and supporting them to be able to do that. Are they being cautious about what they're sharing online? And also protecting themselves and others, right? So reporting any harassment or bullying, or also making sure that they're not taking part in any of that, right? Sometimes, again, they're developing brains and things happen and they get caught up in things, and knowing that that's not within our family values and it's not acceptable, and having those family conversations. So those are some great things that our kids can do. And as a whole, we can just work on cultivating those values of kindness, respect, and service in our community. We ourselves can model what connection looks like, right? So especially those of us as parents, caretakers, teachers, talk about the times you have face-to-face with your peers, your colleagues, right? And deepen the conversations on social connection in schools and our homes, our workplaces, and our community. So talk to people, connect with them about ways that we can work together for this. So I would love to hear anything, Sherry, too. Just, what might be a way that you'll strive to contribute to this like collective commitment of supporting non-digital connections? So what are things that you might do in your own household or in your community or your workplace, with the adults, with the children, with the youngs, the olders, and maybe like what's a wish you have for these kids? Because we know that sadly, we see that many of them are struggling and are hurting and are feeling the loneliness and isolation. Um, we want to make it a healthier and better place for them. So, what are the things that, we kind of wish for our kids right now? Um, I know that today for World Kindness Day, like it just makes me think of, my wish is really for kindness. It to me, it is such a great place to start a conversation with our kids about what that means and how they can contribute to that. Um, just right in our homes or in their schools or in their community. So I hope that this has given you a place to recognize that, again, while there are positives, that there are some hard things for our kids that come in line with the use of media and kind of what is being pumped in and what can we do to support them to better connect with the people around them.
Lots to think about. As people are thinking about the answers to this, I'm going to ask you a couple questions that came up. You're good with that? And we're going to go just a couple minutes over. So we'll try to keep the answers short on these, but we definitely want to get to the questions. So someone is saying that their kid is hearing about pornography and being exposed to it in middle school. Their response is generally to empathize with their feelings of discomfort on this, which is great. I also mentioned how porn is a terrible source of info about sex, consent, and relationships, which is why it's important for schools to provide sex education and for us to keep talking. I'm wondering what else I can do to support my kids.
I love that. So I actually got to talk with Devorah Heitner, and she wrote a book called Screenwise, and she talks about pornography in her book and how that is, she talks about our kids being digital natives and how they are going to come across things. And if we don't take the initiative to talk to them about it, it will happen. Like they will come across something like that. And so having those conversations, I think, is so incredible that you were able to have that open conversation, that your child shared that with you. Like that is so big and so wonderful, because we want them to be able to come to us and talk to us about that kind of stuff. If something, maybe they felt upset or shame when they came across that unintentionally. But it is something that our kids can come across. And there is a place for those conversations. And I think age-wise, your middle schooler, that is probably a time, because they're on media, many of them, and that might happen. I think what you did was so great, and letting them know that that's not necessarily real in the world of what relationships look like if they're coming across those things online. I would say what you did is really fantastic. And I think as well, Devorah's book does a really good job of really talking about that as well. So I'd recommend Screenwise. It's a really, really good one.
And I put that name in the chat box there.
Yeah.
A quick question. Somebody's asking, did you say 13 hours of sleep is what our kids are supposed to be getting?
Oh gosh, yes. I mean, it depends on their age. So what's interesting is like so their rhythm changes as they get older. So we notice a lot of our kids are trying to go to bed later as they get older, and they don't want to get up maybe as much in the morning because they actually need more hours. But they definitely need more hours when they're younger. Like the sleep when they're, in their elementary years is actually like way higher than what they actually are getting as teens. So it really depends on the age of the kiddos that we're talking about.
Yes. And it varies individual to individual too. There's some people who
That don't need it.
yeah,
And
they have like 3 hours of sleep and they're raring to go.
I
That's
know.
not the norm. That's not the norm. But yeah,
No,
everybody is different on that. So.
no, but yeah.
Right. Well, I think that is it for tonight. We've covered a lot. I highly recommend that you go read the book. Marcel did a great job of covering it, but we only had an hour, and there is a lot of information in here. So I would highly recommend this book, The Anxious Generation. The other book that she mentioned is Screenwise, and then I would say the other one. I'll put it in the chat box here. It's easy to remember, but it's Together by Vivek. How do you spell his last name? M-U.
MURTHY. Let me look.
H-Y.
I had to look it up too. I was like, I'm not
Okay.
sure.
I think that's right. But yeah, there's just so much.
That's
If you
right.
want to if you want more information on these things, there's a lot of books, there's a lot of podcasts, there's a lot of information. But the bottom line is that, throughout this whole presentation, Marcel, is we have to make sure our kids are having genuine connections, that the screen isn't taking over their lives, is really what this is all about. Are the screens just not creating space for anything else? And that's what we as parents have to kind of watch. Make sure we're not using screens as a way to keep them safely inside, and not keeping them safe mentally. So we need to keep that in mind.
And I scrolled back to see, and I really liked seeing what you all had to say about feeling connected.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I'm curious now that we've kind of talked through some of this, and I know it is time to go, but if you have anything you'd like to share about when you feel most connected after this, I think that, I would love to see. But this one I really liked, and it just said, engaging in conversation, jokes, closeness physically with my family members, and when I feel like I've shared and been heard. So that was just, I just had to read that one. I really liked that. I think that is just, you can hear the connection in all different parts of this person's life, and the laughs with the jokes and the physical connectedness with family members. And that's beautiful. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
Feels good just hearing that. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Right. Before we go, everybody, tonight, before you jump off, I would love to give Marcel some reactions, that like the hearts and things. And it's always in a different place, I feel like, these days. But let's give her some hearts. And then in the chat box before you jump off, just say something from tonight that resonated. Or as Marcel is asking, what's your commitment or what's your wish? Just give us some feedback on that. We would really appreciate that. Any last moments of wisdom?
No, I want to thank you for having me come talk. I've gotten to speak about this subject quite a bit. I think it's something that we all struggle because we don't know, because it's all new and we're still finding out more and more, and research changes. And one thing I will mention, what I think is really awesome about this, is that as research is changing and coming and things are coming in, this data actually changes on his website. So always can go there to see as the years go. He plans to be adding to the data, which I think is wonderful. I'm glad that you thought the data was clear and helpful.
Yeah.
I didn't want to overshare, but I felt like if we could stay within the parameters of like what we're here, kind of the main pieces, I felt like we could get a good glimpse at that. It gives us a better understanding of really seeing where those rises and falls are in some of the really important things that we want for our kids. And also, as we said, not all media is bad media. This is just about our commitment to finding more connection for our children, and how can we model that and also support that for them, and kind of the why it's really important. So thank you so much.
Right. Well, thank you, Marcel, and thank you everybody for spending your time with us tonight. And we look forward to seeing you at our next parent chat. Good night, everyone.
Night.
Okay, I think that will work. Oh,
Okay.
I've